I'll never forget the sound of metal clicking against metal, handcuffs. The kind of sound that echoes in your chest, makes your heart skip a beat. But I wasn't the one wearing them. No, it was her, my sister, the golden child. The perfect daughter. The one my parents had spent 27 years holding up on a pedestal while I scraped by in her shadow. And as 2 police officers led her out of my parents' pristine suburban home, the same home where she'd made my childhood a living nightmare, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not even satisfaction. It was peace. Finally, someone believed me. But let me back up, because this story, it didn't start with handcuffs and justice. It started with a little girl who just wanted her parents to love her as much as they loved her older sister. If you've ever been the black sheep of your family, if you've ever watched someone get away with hurting you while everyone looked the other way, if you've ever dreamed of the day karma finally catches up to your worst enemy, then hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel, and buckle up, because this is one of the most satisfying justice stories you'll hear all year. My name is Maya, and for the first 18 years of my life, I believed I was fundamentally broken. Not because I did anything wrong. Not because I was a bad kid, but because no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I could never measure up to my older sister. Victoria. Victoria was perfect, at least that's what my parents told me every single day. She had thick, glossy black hair that fell in perfect waves down her back. Mine was thin and mousy brown. She had my mother's high cheekbones and my father's confident smile. I had neither. She was outgoing, charismatic, the kind of person who walked into a room and owned it. I was quiet, anxious, the kind of kid who preferred books to people. From the time I could form memories, Victoria was the sun, and I was just there, orbiting, invisible unless I was being compared. Why can't you be more like your sister? Became the soundtrack of my childhood. When Victoria brought home straight A's, my parents threw parties. Literally. They'd invite the neighbors over, pop champagne, make elaborate dinners. When I brought home straight A's, which I did every single semester, my mom would glance at my report card, nod once and say, "Good, that's what we expect." No celebration. No pride, just expectation. When Victoria made varsity soccer as a freshman, my dad cried. Actual tears of joy. He took her out for ice cream, posted about it on Facebook, called all his friends. When I made first chair violin in the state youth orchestra, something only 3 kids in the entire region achieved, my mom said, "That's nice, honey. Can you help me with the dishes?" I learned early that my accomplishments didn't matter. Not because they weren't impressive, but because they weren't Victoria's. But here's the thing. Nobody tells you about golden child dynamics. The golden child doesn't just get all the love, they also get all the power. And Victoria, she knew it. And she used it, ruthlessly. I was 7 years old the first time Victoria really hurt me. We were in the backyard, playing, or what my parents thought was playing. Victoria had convinced me to close my eyes and spin around, and she'd give me a surprise. Naive, trusting little Maya closed her eyes, spun around, and when I opened them, Victoria shoved me. Hard. I fell backward into my mother's rose bushes, thorns tearing into my arms and back. I screamed. Blood soaked through my Disney princess t-shirt, and when my parents came running, Victoria was already crying. She wouldn't listen to me. Victoria sobbed, her voice dripping with fake concern. I told her not to go near the roses, but she ran toward them anyway. I tried to stop her. My mother scooped Victoria into her arms, comforting her. My father picked the thorns out of my skin with tweezers, muttering under his breath about how I needed to be more careful. I tried to tell them the truth. She pushed me. Maya, don't lie, my mother snapped. Your sister was trying to help you. Stop making excuses. That was the first time. But it wasn't the last. Over the years, Victoria's cruelty became more calculated. More sophisticated. She'd break my toys and tell our parents I'd done it in a tantrum. She'd steal money from my piggy bank and plant it in my room when Mom was cleaning, making it look like I'd stolen from her. She'd pinch me under the dinner table, hard enough to leave bruises, and when I yelped, she'd look at our parents with wide, innocent eyes and say, "What?" I didn't even touch her. And they believed her. Every single time. By the time I was 12, I'd stopped trying to defend myself. What was the point? In my parents' eyes, Victoria was incapable of wrongdoing, and I was the problematic one, the jealous little sister who couldn't handle her perfect sibling success. But the real nightmare began when I turned 14. Victoria was a senior when I was a freshman, which meant that for one horrible year, we attended the same high school. I thought, naively, that maybe she'd ignore me. That she'd be too busy with her own friends, her own life, to bother with her awkward little sister. I was wrong. So wrong. Victoria made it her personal mission to destroy any shred of social life I tried to build. I'd make a friend in class. Victoria would pull them aside, tell them some fabricated story about how I was obsessed with her, how I'd been seeing a therapist for jealousy issues, how I'd done something embarrassing in middle school. By the end of the week, that friend wouldn't talk to me anymore. I tried out for the school play. Victoria, who'd never shown any interest in theater, suddenly auditioned too. And of course, she got the lead, but that wasn't enough. She convinced the director that I didn't take direction well, and got me moved to the crew. I spent 6 weeks painting sets while watching her take bows. The worst part? She'd come home every night and complain to our parents about how hard it was having a sister who was so jealous of her. She'd sigh dramatically, say things like, "I just wish Maya could be happy for me, instead of always trying to compete." And my parents, they ate it up. "Maya, why can't you just support your sister?" my dad would say, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You need to work on your jealousy issues," my mother would add. "It's not attractive." I'd lock myself in my room and cry into my pillow, wondering what I'd done to deserve this. Wondering why I'd been born into a family that saw me as nothing but a problem. But the absolute breaking point? The thing that still makes my hands shake when I think about it? The college incident. I was 17, a senior, and despite everything, despite the neglect, despite the emotional abuse, despite Victoria's constant sabotage, I'd done it. I'd gotten into my dream school, Northeastern University, full scholarship, pre-med program. For the first time in my life, I had something that was mine. Something Victoria couldn't touch. She'd gone to a state school on a partial soccer scholarship. Good, but not this. Not a full ride to a prestigious university. I was terrified to tell my parents, but I was also hopeful. Stupidly, desperately hopeful. Maybe this would make them proud. Maybe this would finally be the thing that made them see me. I waited until dinner. My hands were shaking as I passed the acceptance letter across the table. "I got in," I said quietly. "Full scholarship. They want me to start in the fall." My father took the letter, read it. His eyebrows rose slightly. For a moment, just one beautiful, shining moment, I thought he was going to smile. That he was going to say he was proud. Instead, he looked at my mother. Then at Victoria, who was home visiting for the weekend. That's wonderful, Maya," my mother said slowly, but her voice was flat, obligatory. Victoria stood up from the table. "Wow, congrats, little sis." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm gonna head out. Meeting some friends," she left, and I felt it. That familiar sinking feeling, the knowledge that this wasn't over. I was right. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Northeastern's admissions office. There had been a complaint filed about my application, an anonymous tip that I'd plagiarized my entrance essay. My blood ran cold. I hadn't plagiarized anything. I'd spent months on that essay, bled my soul onto the page. It was the most honest thing I'd ever written. But someone had submitted evidence, a blog post from 2 years earlier that supposedly contained similar phrasing. The blog was fake. I'd never seen it before in my life, but the damage was done. Northeastern launched an investigation, and while they investigated, my scholarship was placed on hold. I was devastated, destroyed. I knew. It was Victoria. She had access to my computer. She knew my passwords. She'd done this. But when I confronted her, she just laughed. "You're paranoid, Maya," she said, twirling her car keys around her finger. "Maybe you should see that therapist Mom and Dad are always suggesting." I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake her until she admitted what she'd done. Instead, I did what I'd learned to do. I swallowed it down, made myself small, invisible. Eventually, Northeastern cleared me of plagiarism. But the scholarship? They gave it to someone else. Funding allocation issues, they said. I ended up at community college, living at home, watching my dreams circle the drain. And Victoria? She got a job at a tech startup in Boston, moved into a trendy apartment, started posting Instagram photos of her perfect life. My parents couldn't have been prouder. I moved out the day I turned 21. I'd been working 2 jobs, saving every penny, sleeping 4 hours a night. I found a tiny studio apartment 40 minutes away, a shoebox with peeling paint and a radiator that clanked like a dying robot, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I could breathe. I cut contact with my family. Not dramatically, not with some big confrontation. I just faded, stopped answering calls, stopped showing up to holidays, deleted social media. My parents didn't even notice for 3 months. When they finally did, my mother left a voicemail. Her voice was clipped, annoyed. "Maya, you're being extremely rude. Your sister's engagement party is next month, and you need to RSVP. Stop being dramatic and call me back." Victoria was engaged. Of course she was. To some finance bro named Chad or Brad or something equally ridiculous. From the photos my mom texted, that I didn't respond to, he looked like every other conventionally attractive man who'd never been told no in his life. I didn't RSVP. I didn't go. And for once I didn't feel guilty. I focused on myself. I went back to school, night classes at a 4-year university. I worked my ass off. I saw a therapist who actually helped me understand that I wasn't the problem, that I'd been raised in a textbook narcissistic family system where I'd been cast as the scapegoat. Hearing that, having someone validate my experience, was like being given permission to breathe underwater. I started to heal, slowly, painfully, but truly. And then, 3 years after I'd left, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work, half listening to a true crime podcast, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Maya Rodriguez?" A woman's voice, professional, serious. "Yes, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Boston Police Department. I'm calling because your name came up in connection with an ongoing investigation, and I'd like to ask you a few questions. Are you available to come down to the station?" My heart stopped. "An investigation? What kind of investigation? Did I do something wrong?" No, nothing like that." Her voice softened slightly. "You're not in any trouble, but we're investigating a case involving your sister, Victoria Rodriguez Patterson, and your parents, David and Linda Rodriguez. It would be helpful if we could speak with you in person." "Victoria." "My parents, an investigation. What did they do? I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Would today work for you?" I called in sick to work. Drove to the police station with my hands clenching the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Detective Chen was a small Asian woman, with sharp eyes and a kind smile. She led me into a private room, offered me coffee, which I accepted just to have something to hold, and sat down across from me. "Maya, I want to start by saying that I believe this is going to be difficult for you to hear, but I want you to know that you're safe, and nothing you tell me today will get you in trouble." I nodded, my throat tight. "We're investigating your sister and her husband for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. During our investigation, we uncovered evidence that suggests Victoria may have engaged in a pattern of harassment, sabotage, and potentially assault against you spanning over 15 years. The room tilted. "What?" Detective Chen opened a folder. Victoria's husband, Bradley Patterson, worked for a nonprofit organization that helps underprivileged students attend college. Over the past 2 years, he and Victoria allegedly embezzled nearly $200,000 from scholarship funds. I couldn't process it. Couldn't make sense of what she was saying. During our investigation, We seized Victoria's personal devices, and we found, well, a significant amount of concerning material. She slid a printed document across the table. It was a screenshot of a group chat. Victoria and 3 of her friends. The messages were from years ago, from when we were in high school. Victoria. Operation Ruin. Maya's life is going perfectly LOL. Friend. You're so bad. Victoria. She's such an easy target. I told Brittany that Maya has a crush on her boyfriend. Maya's gonna be eating lunch alone for weeks. There were dozens of messages like this, hundreds maybe. Screenshots of the fake blog post she'd created to sabotage my scholarship. Emails she'd sent to my high school friends, pretending to be me, saying horrible things. Photos of bruises she'd given me with captions like, "She bruises so easy, El Mao." My hands were shaking so hard I had to put down my coffee cup. Maya, Detective Chen said gently, we also found evidence that Victoria used your personal information, your social security number, specifically, to open several credit cards in your name. She maxed them out and never paid them. You currently have about $30,000 in debt tied to your identity that you likely don't know about. I couldn't breathe. 30,000? We're working with fraud prevention services to get that resolved. But Maya, she leaned forward. I need to ask you some questions about your childhood, specifically about instances where Victoria may have physically harmed you. And so I told her. Everything. The rose bushes. The pinching. The shoving down the stairs that Victoria said was an accident. I'd fractured my wrist. The time she locked me in the basement for 4 hours and told our parents I'd run away. I was 9. I told her things I'd buried so deep, I'd almost convinced myself they hadn't happened. The time I finished, I was crying. Not sad crying, angry crying. The kind where your whole body shakes with the injustice of it all. Your parents, Detective Chen said carefully. Did they know about any of this? I tried to tell them. They never believed me. She wrote something down. We'll need to speak with them as well. Based on what you've told me, there may be grounds for charges related to neglect and enabling abuse. It took 4 months for the case to come together. 4 months of interviews, depositions, evidence gathering. I had to face my parents. Detective Chen arranged a meeting. When I walked into that interrogation room and saw my mother and father sitting there, looking older and smaller than I remembered, I felt nothing. Maya, my mother said, reaching for my hand. Baby, we've been so worried. We haven't heard from you in... Don't. My voice was calm, flat. Just don't. The detective asked them questions. About Victoria, about me, about the incidents I'd reported. And you know what my parents said? Victoria would never do those things. Maya's always been dramatic, jealous. Even faced with evidence, screenshots, medical records, bank statements, they defended her. My father actually said, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Victoria's a good person. That's when I knew. They would never choose me, even now, even with everything laid bare. I walked out of that police station, and I never looked back. The day of Victoria's arrest, I was at work. Detective Chen called me. It's happening now, she said. I thought you might want to know. I left work early. I don't know why. I didn't plan to, but I found myself driving to my parents' house. The house I'd grown up in, the house I'd fled from. I parked down the street, watched from a distance. 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing. Officers walked up to the front door. My father answered. I could see his face go pale. And then Victoria appeared in the doorway. Still beautiful, still perfect looking. But her face? Her face was contorted with rage and fear. The officers spoke to her. She shook her head violently. Started yelling. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see my mother in the background, crying, reaching for her. And then the officer pulled out handcuffs. Victoria tried to pull away. The officer, calm, professional, guided her hands behind her back. Click. The sound I described at the beginning of this story. The sound of metal on metal, of justice, of the universe finally balancing itself. They walked her to the police car. She was crying now, screaming something at my parents. My mother collapsed on the front lawn. My father held her, and I sat in my car and felt that peace wash over me. Victoria was charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and harassment. Her husband took a plea deal and testified against her. She went to trial. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. I'd given my statement. I'd done my part. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison. With parole, she'll likely serve 3. The credit card debt was cleared from my name. The nonprofit Victoria stole from was able to recover most of the funds. And my parents? They called me once. After the sentencing, my mother was hysterical. "How could you do this to your sister?" she sobbed. "You destroyed her life. You always were jealous of her." I hung up, blocked their numbers, changed mine. I heard through a distant cousin that they're in therapy now, that they're working through their guilt, that they wish they'd listened. Too little. Too late. Here's what I've learned, and this is the honest truth. Some people will never see you, not because you're not worth seeing, but because seeing you would require them to admit they were wrong. And for people like my parents, their ego is more important than their child. Victoria didn't turn out to be a monster randomly. She was created, enabled, worshipped so thoroughly that she believed she could do anything without consequences. And me? I wasn't born broken. I was broken by people who should have protected me, but I survived. I healed. I built a life that's mine. A life where I'm not compared to anyone, where my accomplishments matter, where I'm seen. I graduated with my bachelor's degree last spring. I'm applying to nursing programs now. I have friends who actually care about me. I have a therapist I see every other week. I have a small apartment with plants that I somehow managed to keep alive. I'm happy. Genuinely, truly happy. And Victoria? She's in a prison cell, probably still convinced she's the victim. Karma doesn't always come when you want it. But sometimes it comes exactly when it should. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just the sound of handcuffs clicking shut on someone who thought they were untouchable. And sometimes that's enough. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the scapegoat in your own family, or if you just love seeing karma actually work, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me, what's the most satisfying moment of justice you've ever witnessed? And subscribe, because trust me, I've got more stories like this that'll make your jaw drop. Thanks for listening, and remember, the truth always comes out eventually.